Hi everyone, my name is Victoria Guerrero. I am a activist from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, and I am part of the student organizing team here at Advocates for Youth. My pronouns are she, her. I am so happy to be hosting this panel today as part of the Sex Ed for All month that Advocates for Youth is participating in. Advocates is an organization that works to ensure young people's sexual and reproductive health and rights, and I am so very proud to be working with them. Every May, organizations across the country come together to observe Sex Ed for All month as a way to highlight the sex ed that young people are getting, while also having very important conversations about the sex ed that we're definitely not getting. So I thought it'd be interesting today to have this conversation directly with young people. What we're going to talk about today is what we learned about sex ed, how it has affected our lives, and then we'll share some information and resources for folks who are where we were just a few years ago, growing up, thinking about all this stuff, trying to get important questions answered, and they might need some guidance. So let's get started. Let's start by meeting our panelists. If everybody can introduce yourselves, we'll share our names, our advocates program, our pronouns, and then go ahead and tell me, rate your sex ed from a scale of 1 to 10. Let's start with August.
All right, hello everyone. My name is August Clayton. I am with student organizers and I use they and he pronouns. I'd say my sex ed was around a 2, if 1 is the worst.
Thank you. Let's move over to Maura.
Hi, I'm Moira. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm with the Young Women of Color for Reproductive Justice Collective. If I were to rate my sex ed growing up, I would go a little bit higher than August and call it a solid 3.
Thank you so much. Let's move over to Anna.
Hi everyone, my name's Anna. I use she, her, and Aya pronouns. I am also with the YWAC Collective, or Young Women of Color for Reproductive Justice. And I have to say that I'd rate my sex ed growing up like a 3 as well.
Thank you. Let's move over to Victoria.
Hey, I'm Victoria. I'm with YWAC and I use she, her, hers pronouns. So if I had to rate my sex ed in my school, it would be a generous 7. Like if I'm being like very generous, it was a 7. But after that, I became a peer sex educator. So I would say we're at a solid 9. Still room to grow though.
Definitely. And last, let's go to Lily.
Hi, my name is Lily. I use any pronouns, and I am a youth ambassador with the Maze for Advocates for Youth, as well as a member of the NYAA, also with Advocates. And, oh, sorry. And my rating in sex ed in school, is probably a 2.
2, awesome. Okay, well, like I mentioned before, my name is Victoria. My pronouns are she, her, and if my sex ed was a number, it would definitely be a 1 or a 0. It was non-existent. We didn't have one. So with that being said, let's just get into it. Once you started dealing with decisions about sex, sexuality, and relationships and other aspects of growing up, did you find that there was information you didn't have? What was missing?
I would say definitely language was missing for me. I didn't really have the language to describe how I felt about my body and my relationship to it, like being different from a lot of my peers. And also like how sex even worked when it wasn't between 2 cishet people. I went to a school in Southern Maryland, not Texas or anything, but you would think that it would be a little more comprehensive when we're learning about these things, but all in all, I didn't know what I was feeling was gender dysphoria, and I couldn't apply that to anything. I didn't have the words for it, so I was just uncomfortable or weird. I think another thing would have been conversations about consent, like real, raw, and honest conversations, because as we're like talking and having more emerging conversations about what's allowed, what's not allowed, what's comfortable, what's not comfortable, I'm recently learning about like persuasion is coercion, actually, and that's actually assault. And I think if I had that that knowledge back then, I would have been able to advocate for myself a lot more. So I think those two would have been like extremely, or three would have been extremely helpful in my journey in sex ed.
I think it's the same issues for me. I definitely didn't have the vocabulary, the words to be able to articulate that. Number one, like my growing sexuality wasn't something to be ashamed of. It wasn't sinful, because even though I went to public school, like that entered our discussions, even though like discussions of literally anything else that was useful and accurate didn't. I also couldn't, since I already felt stigmatized for having like sexual desires, I felt doubly stigmatized for like thinking about how I was beginning to realize that I'm actually queer. That was not in the curriculum whatsoever. And having to have those double layers of judgment, stigmatization, just by its sheer absence in what we were studying during our sex ed was completely missing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I agree 100%. Consent is like, it's so complex, and it's like something that isn't talked about at all. I think for me, and I think that just because like it's something that I'm still dealing with, even like as like an adult, is like the conversation around pleasure, and like what pleasure looks like for me, like how does it feel like for me, and also for like a partner that I may be with, right? And I think also because pleasure, like you can also seek it on your own, right? And like masturbation is okay, it's very common, it's like, but it's so stigmatized and shamed that even now, right, like people are still getting comfortable talking about it, and it's still this very like tabooish thing that no one wants to like really have a conversation around it. And also a little bit also of like what y'all touched on was also just what pleasure looked like in relationships with like amongst women and like queer relationships, because that's not something that you see, right? Like it's not something that's prioritized. It's always like pleasure is always prioritized, even in like movies and media and sex ed in general, right? It's not only cishet normative, but it's also always like centralizing the men, right? And so I think that in past relationships and like encounters, I never prioritized my own pleasure. Like it was always about like the man, and like even to the point that sometimes it was like things that I didn't want to do or didn't feel comfortable with, right? But it was like, oh, it's kind of like, this is what I have to do, but it's like, you don't have to do anything. And I think that now I'm finally, through a lot of conversations and like unlearning and relearning a lot of this like shame and stigma, comes to a point that like I'm also just like freeing myself of that stigma and shame, and actually being able to choose experiences that I want and that actually value and prioritize me and like my pleasure.
There we go. We got it. We figured it out. I love that for you, Anna. I love that for you. Yeah, so I think I was missing literally everything y'all said. So I was missing affirmation, like literally affirming my identity, my like emerging identity at the point, because I had my first like sex ed in school when I was like in high school. So like affirming my emerging identities, a conversation about consent. She tried. I'm gonna just say that I really like her, so I'm gonna say she tried. But and I'm gonna say that I'm gonna recognize that she didn't have. She was ill-equipped to have a conversation about consent that was like rooted in autonomy, and like your body is yours. And how do I say this? She didn't have the tools to have a conversation about consent that centered her students, and like wasn't very was pleasure based. It was, what is a yes? What is a yes for you? What is a I want to run around, scream like I just won the lottery such an enthusiastic yes for you. Not what are you just, what's not illegal, what are you not okay with. And yeah, and affirming that pleasure is a thing that I deserve and that I can seek.
I think my biggest thing was like not being taught what healthy relationships look like. Also, the lack of language. It's also tying in with the consent. Just seeing like red flags for like teen dating violence and things that really like affected young people and people that I know and care about. Just not being able to have those conversations and not having people to have those conversations with outside of my parents.
What do you wish someone had told you or that you had learned at a younger age? It could be regarding sexual, reproductive health, whatever.
I think for me, definitely that it was okay to have a different or disconnected relationship with my body. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I really did not grow up in a town, in a city, in a tri-state area that was really forthcoming or forthright about what being trans is, or what gender dysphoria is. So I really was just like, oh yeah, I'm just a masked woman who doesn't like to be touched. And I wish that even then that I had someone to tell me that I didn't have to let anyone touch me or convince me of my desires if I genuinely did not feel them. For me growing up, I had just a very numb, disconnected relationship with my body that I am just like within the past year, am just starting to get to know and get to love. So I think having some language to describe it, like someone telling me that this is a part of my journey and this is what that journey is. Like, I don't think I needed someone to name it for me, but just to know that I wasn't isolated or alone in that, and that I can advocate for myself in certain situations as it pertains to sexuality, sexual education, sex in general, that like, this is who I am and I don't have to go along with things just because that's the narrative.
For so long, I felt like I really got to internalize a lot of the societal narratives that said that like sexual activity and sex, like discomfort came with that. And I really wish that I had been able to learn that, you know, like when I was younger, the experiences that I had with cis men didn't always have to naturally come with like discomfort and pain. That's something that like I think women are always taught to like internalize growing up, that like, well, it's always going to be less fun for you. And I wish I didn't have to like take that. I wish there was like conversations about that, and there really just wasn't. And that led to me growing up and like as I evolved in my relationships, being able to like not communicate to my partner, and also not recognizing like the flags that like the people that I was involved with like really like did not care as much about me as they did for their own, not only pleasure but also their own like the way that they treated me as a person.
Yeah. I'm like, wow. I definitely think that's something that I wish I had been taught, was also like just pertaining to consent again, because consent is like, it's ongoing. It's so complex. It's not just like when you're gonna have sex, it's like all throughout the relationship and any kind of relationship. I think that would have solved so many issues. For me, not only when I was younger, but as I entered adulthood and as I entered like my first like long-term relationship and like all these other things. And I think that it also probably would have like solved issues that I had been dealing with even like at a younger age that like carried on into adulthood. And maybe I would have been able to like deal with them a lot sooner. And maybe would have gone to therapy like a lot sooner. And it wouldn't have affected me so much now, right? Like now I know because I've sought out this like information, because I learned like how bad or like how many holes, right, as like Victoria is saying, like that education that I had. So I think for me, like that's definitely one of the biggest things that I would have really wished I would have understood and learned more about.
Yeah, I feel that. Um, so I kind of have a list. I mainly would have loved to hear that it's okay to have a crush on a girl, to be queer, to masturbate, to come, to want to come, to use a lot of lube, to be frustrated with my body, to say no and mean it, say yes and mean it. Yeah, to have sex, to have a little, to have a lot, to have none. Yeah, I think I really would have loved permission. Not that I needed it, but I kind of needed it.
I think what I would have wanted most was language and just like discussions around language and like verbalizing my emotions and how I felt towards my body and towards my relationships, and just knowing that those feelings were valid and not dirty or inherently like predatory. And I just had a lot of outside like people coming in from the outside telling me, oh, you have a crush on a girl, that's not okay, that's gross. Or, oh, this boy pushed you down the slide, oh, he just has a crush on you, like that's not okay. And just like wondering, like, how does my gender and my sexuality, how did that play into my relationships with other people? And if they react poorly to me coming out to them, how do I deal with that? Really, I just wanted somebody to tell me that presentation doesn't equal gender, pronouns doesn't equal gender. If somebody is doing something that you're not comfortable with, or is trying to say like, oh, if you love me, you'll do this, like that's not okay. And that you don't owe anyone anything. Like you don't owe anyone like any type of like sexual interaction. And just being told that at a young age, or not even just sexual interaction, just like anything really, just being told that at a young age probably would have helped me a lot more.
So like now that you all find yourselves in a position where you feel you have more of the answers to the questions that you had, your younger selves had, what are some of the resources or places that you would direct someone who had similar questions? Preferably some reliable sources.
I know for me, my first like positive resource I had was a clinic. I first went to it when I started feeling like, okay, maybe something needs to happen. Like I'm still feeling these feelings, whatever. But I went to Mazzoni Center in Philly, and it was an LGBTQ clinic, and I was privileged enough to be in an area that had access to that particular direct targeted kind of care. So I learned like from step 1 to step 20 about what healthy sex looks like, what healthy relationships look like. From then on, it was like, oh, Planned Parenthood is a thing. And like, they're more than just abortions. And even if they were, like, it's okay. And oh my God, these stickers are so cute, but they also are telling me about PrEP and PEP and art and all of the things that I needed to know, being a Black trans man. So I'm always like, whenever I feel like someone needs those resources, I'm always pointing them to Planned Parenthood or their clinics. But Advocates for Youth has also given me an enormous wealth of resources that I didn't even think I needed until I joined the team. So it was I think having so many hands in the pot, sometimes it seems like it's overcrowded, but when they're all geared toward like one common goal of like a healthy body, a healthy mindset, yeah, it works out pretty well.
Same. I cannot sing enough praises of advocates for giving me so many more tools, even as like an older young adult. Like there, I keep learning new things from the website, from the Real Healthy Youth Act legislation with partners at SECUS, literally going through what the proposed legislation looked like, kind of like a test, and like thinking about it as a syllabus and seeing like where you have like gaps in your knowledge you might not be familiar with. That's going to be so immensely helpful. Our Bodies, Our Choice, the website, they update it. And honestly, the student organizers, the Young Women of Color for Reproductive Justice collectives, Instagrams, like literally our personal Instagrams. I am learning so much information every day from my peers and advocates, like the literal people like on the ground who are organizers. And it's just like you can't get enough like new information. It's been so great, especially if it's like someone who's like willing to engage in dialogue and talk about it. That's like the best kind of way that you learn this information, you internalize it. It's great.
Yeah, I also not just because this is like an Advocates for Youth panel, but I specifically what I really like from Advocates is the little pamphlets that they have of like, I think I might be bisexual, I think I might be transgender and stuff, because I have actually used those to give out to youth that I work with or worked with in the past. Who were like questioning, right, the different identities. And I just like, they're just really, really great resources. Another one that I specifically like for folks in Texas is the Texas Freedom Network. They do kind of a little bit more like legislative based, but they have like sex ed reports on like sex ed in Tejas in general and what that looks like. And they even have actual curriculum for those of like, for those public educators who may be listening that are allies of choice and autonomy, because right, people in schools and students in schools are the ones that have the power to actually create their own curriculum. I think sometimes the youth and students specifically underestimate how much power they actually have. But like look into your shacks, you know, your sexual health advisory councils, no, school health advisory councils, I'm sorry. But they do deal with sex ed, and it's possible to pass actual curriculum that's going to benefit you and your peers. So TFN's a great resource for that. Another one that I really like is Amaze. They specifically also have information on like K through 12, and it's very like animated, but I love that. Like I'm like a señora now, but I love cartoons. I will watch those. And I've also used those specifically for my nibblings as well when they're home. Like I'll sit down and I'll like show them the videos, right? Because maybe they, as much as I try to be approachable, maybe my nibblings don't think I'm that approachable, and maybe I'm like, they're like this weird tia, you know? So at least they have that resource that they can go to. And also kind of piggybacking off of Moira, I guess other like non-traditional resources would be people and advocates for youth, like people that I followed through the different programs, just like consistently have a lot of resources. Some people that I specifically like in Instagram, I'm gonna shout them out, are the Fat Sex Therapist, Sex Ed with Irma, who's also based in Tejas, and Sex Positive Families. I also especially like Sex Positive Families for like young adults like us, because I think sometimes we forget the power that we also have and how much like encounter we have with nibblings and other younger folks who we can like potentially be that like person or that mentor that we wished we would have had when we were younger. So yeah, those are the resources I'm shouting out.
Literally everything Anna said. Maura, Yes, so many people I follow from advocates, like their individual like accounts. The other day, a girl I met through advocates literally just was bored and at home and went on Instagram Live and was like, "So I'm gonna teach y'all how to use a condom correctly," and literally like brought out a condom demonstrator and was just going live in her living room. Planned Parenthood trained me 5 years ago as a peer sex educator. So always a great resource. Sometimes I'll go to them when I have forgotten the answer to somebody's question. Amaze is a really great one if you have like young folks in your life, like Anna said, because sometimes they're not always comfortable having those conversations with you, but you're like, here's a resource, I'm gonna just slide it your way, do whatever you want with it. Have fun, be safe, let me know if you need anything. And that can always be really helpful. What else? I follow Erica Hart on Instagram. They are a great resource. They are actually like a sex educator. They were trained at Widener University and just a wealth of knowledge constantly. They do a lot of work centering pleasure, and that's something I've been trying to add more and trying to like incorporate more in the education I do as a peer sex educator. I normally my training wasn't super pleasure based, and I've gotten in trouble for saying too much about pleasure when I've like gone out into communities and like done partnerships with different organizations and stuff, and they're like, that doesn't always vibe with the brand. But it's really important, and so I'm grateful that they give me ways to center that.
Yeah, as Victoria and Anna said, Amaze is super duper great. They have like short little videos on YouTube. They have an Instagram. They have a website. It's just like a really, really great resource. The videos are age appropriate. They're comprehensive and inclusive. They're just really great. I've shown them to my little brother. I've shown them to my cousins. I'm going to show them to my sister when she can sit down long enough to watch a 3-minute video and not get distracted. And yeah, Amaze is just really, really great. Another one is Planned Parenthood. Their website has a little chat box called Rue. It's like Ask Rue, and you can like type in your question and it'll pull up a small article on so it's like, is it normal to have a crush on a girl? And it would bring up an article about like your relationships and things that you might fall under when it comes to sexuality. And yeah, so Rue is really great. And then on YouTube, there is a sex therapist whose channel is called Sexplanations. I discovered that through John Green. Sexplanations is pretty great. Her videos, they're fun. She's kind of goofy, so it makes like some awkward conversations not as like difficult to want to watch, because it doesn't feel like you're like watching something that's super like a documentary. How do you say that? Documentary. Sorry. Like it doesn't feel like it's super like academic. It almost feels like you're like talking to a friend that just happens to know a lot about stuff. So yeah, Sexplanations, Amaze, and Planned Parenthood. Rhubarb.
Those are all amazing resources. I think the main thing with like sexual education and reproductive health education is that while it like should start when we're young, it never really ends because we're constantly evolving, we're constantly learning new things. We're in a constant need of learning and re-educating ourselves about sex, about reproductive health. Thank you all so much for your answers. I want to thank you all so much for joining us today for this panel. It's really inspiring not only to be having these conversations with you all here on the panel, but knowing that you all are back home having these conversations within your own community as well is amazing. And before we wrap up, is there anything that anyone else would like to add to the conversation? If that's all, I'm going to thank you all again. To those watching, everyone make sure to go and follow the hashtag SexEdForAll for more information, resources, and some youth-led sex ed throughout the month. And visit Advocates for Youth's website, advocatesforyouth.org, and Twitter @AdvocatesTweets to sign up for updates. Thank you all so much.